degrees outside right now. It's like record colds here right now. Like -4 tonight or something.
I'm sweating my nuts off over here. So good way to start the video. But yeah, anyway.
Hey, Kurt.
What's up?
I was just going to let you know, there's, at one point when I busted one up in the bottom left, it's replaced by an ignition tournament. That tournament is a satellite, so if you want to, you can largely ignore that.
Okay. I mean, I think some people have been asking about Sadie stuff too, so it's probably going to be nice to have one of those going as well. I don't know if any spots come up or whatnot. I guess we'll kind of see how things go as we go along. But yeah, again, thanks, Joe, for submitting the footage. We are looking over 4 tables here, including the 2600 Venom, so it should be pretty fun. You about ready to roll here, Steve? Should we just get into it?
Yeah, good to go. Yeah, good to go.
And I guess, I mean, we'll see what happens. Obviously, we're going to ask Joe quite a bit about what he was thinking about throughout the hands, obviously, and then we'll interact with the members as well. But, for those of you who were here for the Battle with Odin that we did with Pete on Friday, I think it was, pretty nice that we flew through a bunch of hands. And, I mean, not that we don't want to ask you guys questions, but we got to kind of work on more spots by just kind of Pete and I giving our analysis and then going from there. Obviously, certain spots required a little bit more in-depth conversation where we can ask you guys what's going on. So I guess we'll leave that up to you guys as well. I mean, we have 43 minutes of footage here. Obviously, we're going to stop and talk about spots. And then maybe it's okay if we just kind of go a little bit more slowly because we can break this up into 2 days. So obviously, I like to have interaction with you guys, but we're kind of in between how many hands we want to get through and then how much we want to interact, because sometimes the sessions go a little bit more slowly when we're kind of asking every single spot. So I guess we'll leave that up to you guys, and we'll just try to see how much footage we can go through, and then if there's spots that really warrant attention, or if you guys really have any questions, we'll stop the footage and see what you guys think. But for now, we'll just get into it.
Sounds good, mate. Let's do it.
So first spot here on the bottom right, it looks like we have the 7-6 offsuit. We are effectively 40 bigs deep because of the big blind stack. I would definitely say this is a bit on the loose side. I think bottom of our offsuit suited opening range is 9-8 off, if I'm not mistaken. I'll just check out my chart real quick. But yeah, I guess first hand here, we got the Ace King 9. We got called by the small and big blind here, so we're going up against 3 opponents. What do you think about this, Steve?
Yeah, I think this is probably, like you're saying. I think it might be 8-9 off. It could even be 9-10 off. I might be wrong on that. It might be 7-8 off.
There's a sliver. There's a sliver of 8-7 off, so it's indifferent with 8-7 off. So okay. I guess that's a cutoff point from what I have. Yeah.
Okay, cool. So it's probably a little bit too loose of an open, but on this board, I'd probably just put in this kind of bet that he's going with. I mean, you have positioned it's 3 ways, but you also have no showdown value at all. So I think it's worth at least a small bet. And then probably I'm likely just going to give up because this hand, I mean, maybe an 8 on the turn would be maybe a card to continue on, even though the opponent could have a Jack 10 or something of that nature. So I'd probably put in a small C bet like this if you are going to open it. I think when you have no showdown value like this, I think it is worth still small C bet, a third pot. Joe did.
Okay. Well, obviously, I think this is a bit of a loose open, but we'll get past that. We can just proceed like we have 7-6 suited, I suppose. I would say if we're in a heads-up pot versus the big blind, then we can bet our range here. But we have the small blind calling here too, who is definitely going to have a bit of a tighter range than the big blind will, because they'll just be calling with a bunch of trash that we get auto folds on a board that's really good for us. So I would say this is definitely on the loose side. I don't even think I would roll a bet in this situation, honestly, especially without a backdoor flush draw, because the only real card that gives us decent equity is an offsuit 8. And everything else, we essentially don't have a card that we can kind of barrel on. Plus, we really need to tighten up our range when we're going up against 2 opponents as opposed to 1. So I would say even if we were just facing the small blind here, this would be a very loose bet. But the fact that we have 2 opponents to go up against here, I think it's definitely on the loose side. Yeah, we can't win the pot if we don't bet, but we can't just bet with every single bluff that we have on a board that's, still pretty good for us, obviously. But we have to take into consideration that we're going up against 2 opponents instead of just 1. So I would say this is definitely a bit too loose, and I don't even think I would roll a bet in this situation. Do you want to comment on this at all, Joe, or should we just keep going?
Yeah, all I'd say is I'm well aware it's too loose. I open generally 1 or 2 pips wider on global just because the field is so soft, and thinking here a lot what Steve was thinking, where I just am going to fire one and done probably.
And that's actually a great point that you made. Actually, that I wanted to address. I think somebody posted about raise sizes in the hand discussions thread real quick. I think maybe it was Found and Flood. But a point that I was going to make is that if you are generally a stronger player, you can probably open up a bit more on the aggressive side because we're always going to be a little bit more incentivized to play more pots when we have an edge on the field. So, and then the second point I was going to put in is that if we are opening a bit on the looser side, then we probably want to make our open sizes a bit smaller because we're stealing wider, so we don't want to put in, extra money. I think it's more beneficial to put in less in that situation. So, I don't hate the open by any means, especially for the reasons you gave. But I still think that the C bet is definitely a bit on the loose side, and we probably need a bit more equity to be betting into multiple opponents here. Even though the board should overall be best for our range, I don't think we can just stab any 2 cards here. And this is essentially the very bottom of our range. And one more point that I want to point out here is that just because we don't bet on the flop doesn't mean we can't either bluff on the turn or the river. So we're not necessarily giving up if we just check here on the flop. So we'll keep going though.
Yeah, good points. So what are we looking at up there? The top right, you're just clicking something. I'm scared. There's no table over there. Maybe there is a table?
It's been online, but they don't show on the replay.
Okay.
Okay, so we turned the 6 and decided to check, and then on the jack, our opponent checked as well, and we just showed down. What do you think about this, Steve?
Honestly not sure. I mean, I feel like it's fine as played. I think the opponent could even still check some aces and kings on the river, if he had an ace-5 suited or something. I don't necessarily think he's just going to be betting all his ace-x on this card. So it seems fine. It also probably seems like a board you could sometimes put in a bluff in. I'd probably check back usually, but honestly not positive here. Curious what you guys say.
So we probably have some check here on the turn, I would imagine. I think checking is probably fine. But that being said, even though we turn some showdown value here, we are essentially behind everything that's not specifically Jack 10, Queen Jack. And we also block hands I think you should be calling in the small blind with a hand like King 6 suited here, which we obviously block. On the turn here, same with ace 6 suited. So essentially the strongest hands he's going to have here, he never has pocket 9s, he never has aces or kings, he 3-bets all these hands. He might even 3-bet some ace 9 offsuit here. So the small blind is really kind of capped towards specifically king 9 and some ace 9, I would say. And then obviously turn king 6 suited and ace 6 suited. So other than that, he's going to have a lot of 1 pair ace x, 1 pair king x, some 9-8 of clubs, things of that nature. So even though we have some quote-unquote showdown, I don't think it's necessarily so strong that we just want to check here every single time. And I also think blocking some of the strongest hands he's going to continue with, like I said, with the ace 6 and the king 6 is pretty valuable. And we also probably put him in a pretty tough spot. Let's say if he has a hand king 8 of diamonds and we double barrel here. Are you continuing in the small blind shoes if you have king 8 of diamonds to a double barrel?
Probably not.
Right.
Unlikely.
Right. Same with a hand 10-9 of spades, 9-8 of clubs, things like that. So not only do we block some of his strongest hands, but we also get better hands to fold, which is always 2 reasons why I think double barreling this card has some merit here. Because even though we do have some value, I don't think we're necessarily beating a lot of hands in his range that aren't specifically Queen 10, Jack 10, and Queen Jack here, really. So the check on the turn might be fine, but I would definitely consider double barreling this card for sure, because we definitely get better hands to fold, and we block a lot of the strongest potential hands that he might have turned here. So.
Yeah, that's actually a really good point. And obviously, you see his hand, he's got Jack 10, he's got a lot of Queen 10, Jack 10, Queen Jack. I mean, you have the best hand against those anyway, but a lot of bad rivers against those hands too.
Yeah, and as he played it, I would probably still choose to show it down and just kind of give up in the spot. Like, I think we have better hands to bluff, even though I don't think we win the spot very much on this specific river card. I still think we probably have better hands that we can end up bluffing here, like some 10-8, some queen 8s, things that block straights here pretty much. So yeah, I don't think we win this pot a lot as played, but especially with this river card. But I think checking down is probably still the best play because we're just gonna have better hands to end up bluffing here. So yeah, anything you want to add to that, Joe?
Nope, good to go.
Okay, cool. Let's keep going. Guess we can kind of move it along until we find some spots here. Looks like we got one on the top right. Okay, so I guess before we see what's going to happen here, because I think we probably have two options here. So we have middle position open. We are 22.5 bigs effective in the low jack with pocket sevens. What do you guys want to do here? Are we calling?
Oh, that's the real, yeah.
Yeah, we calling.
That's the real here, guys.
Go ahead, Steve.
So go ahead, there.
What's up? Go ahead, Steve. I didn't hear you. I was cutting you off.
No, I was just going. We're pulling the room on this one, right?
Right. So again, this is MP versus low jack, 22.5 bigs effective with pocket sevens facing a 2.5x open. We calling, we folding, we jamming, we 3-betting. Q's calling, Slammer's raising 3x.
I don't think I don't know if she's. Let me just saw that. Sure, if you saw.
Yeah, top right here, top right. Okay.
All right, Hugh says probably calling. Slammer says calling. ESG said clam jam that mofo. I don't know if he's actually jamming. He says he's not jamming. See what Founded Flood's saying. This is a very interesting spot.
Yeah, I think it's probably close.
Yeah, it seems pretty close.
So it's actually effectively 20 bigs because the opener has around 20. So
right.
I think this would definitely be. I mean, if we could have stats here, it would be great. But yeah, I do think it's close for what it's worth. So interested to see.
Okay. Founded Flood says jam or fold. Not calling it this time. I'd probably just ship it. Lowest pair I do this with. Honestly, I'd probably just ship lowest pair he'd ship with. He's saying, okay, fair.
Someone get ESG some decaf.
I never even heard of this. I mean, like a clam jam. Female version of cock blocking. Learn something new every day.
Wait, what is it? Sorry, I just popped in.
I mean, look at the training sessions. The clam jam, female version of cock blocking.
Oh, yeah, that makes sense. I never heard that either. That's great. Do we have any info on our opponent here?
I don't think so.
Or nothing?
No, but I think it is relevant information, at least if we, we're obviously going into this one blind, but I would say the spot probably becomes a little bit dependent. So, yeah, I guess that's just...
Is this a turbo or what is it?
I think it's just a regular tournament here. It's regular free.
Stacks are pretty relatively thin. I mean, there's a 72 big stack, but...
Okay, so you guys want to throw in your 2 cents here real quick?
Yeah, I mean, my first instinct is to shove, but I think this is extremely, extremely close. And I kind of don't see I almost feel like you can go both directions here, and like between calling and shoving. Mm-hmm. I do think he's going to be opening on a little bit of a tighter range at this position, opening I mean, just opening at this stack depth at this position, he's probably going to be opening a little bit tighter, although he's still going to be opening a lot of like Queen 10 suited, Jack 10 suited, I don't know, like an Ace-X suited. So there probably are a lot of hands you're going to be getting to fold, and as I'm kind of saying that, I'm kind of leaning a little bit more towards shove. The other reason I like maybe shoving a tiny bit more is sevens won't play as well post-flop here, so calling does kind of, I don't know, seem a little weak, but I feel like both options kind of can be in play here, but I'm slightly leaning shove.
Okay. Max, you want to throw in your 2 cents?
I mean, I'd probably lean shove just because the playability of pocket sevens with, 20 bigs effective isn't, the most exciting idea.
Mm-hmm.
It is possible to just find a fold and move on here just because it's a relatively thin spot. But I guess in that sense, I'd probably, I don't know if I'd flat very often. I guess I would sometimes.
Mm-hmm.
I guess I'm splitting into 3. Maybe I just roll and go and break it up in thirds.
Sure, that's the answer I'd usually going towards. So, anyway, so there's a couple things we have to consider here. One, we have a relatively early position raise here from a short stack. So overall, between the position and the size of their stack, their range is going to be pretty tight here overall, which means we need to have pretty good hands to continue from this position because we also have 5 other opponents to act. So we need to keep that in mind as well when making a decision here. I would say folding is absolutely out of the question. Like, we can't fold here. Maybe we can start folding at like probably 5s, and 6s is probably close as well. But I think with 7s, I think it's like right on the cutoff where we absolutely can't fold here. So looking at the chart, I would imagine, at least my chart anyway says we full frequency call here. That being said, I would probably, depending, if this guy was opening a little too aggressively, I think we can definitely introduce jamming here. But again, we do have to consider not only the opener's range, but we have to consider the other 5 people that are left to act after we do, because they can still wake up with a hand, of course. So I would actually be a lot more prone to jam this if we were on the button, because there's less people that can actually wake up. But then the flip side is we are closing the action, we're on the button, we are guaranteeing that we're playing in position. So even looking at my charts, it's still full frequency calling with pocket 7s even on the button. It's a little bit indifferent with like 8s and 9s. So, but this hand is basically, it's too strong to fold, but it's just not strong enough to push here. And I know the chart's not going to take into consideration so much the playability of the hand either. So I think we can make little tweaks here and kind of take that into consideration as well. But in general, we should just be full frequency calling here, I would imagine. And if we have a specific note on our opponent that he's opening a little bit too aggressively off the stack size, I think we would probably introduce some 3-bet jam here.
And what about with pocket 8s? Are we kind of focusing that the same direction? Are you probably flatting here with pocket 8s, or do you start? I know like 9s, I would assume you're shoving.
Yeah.
8s, is it still flat for you?
At least in my charts, it's indifferent, and I would probably, 8s is probably strong enough to end up jamming, and again, I would probably take notes into consideration if we have enough hands on somebody. So, again, somebody a little bit on the tighter side, probably just call, and somebody who's been a little bit more active, we can probably jam. Like, for what it's worth, I think this is probably still fine. This would actually be a good spot to run in ICMizer, really, to see how much the spot is actually winning. Like, I'm sure it's winning, but I think it's thin at best. And that's mainly because, not so much because of its overall hand strength, but because of the other players left to act ahead of us. So, just one thing.
I'm gonna actually run it right now, but you can keep going. But I'll run it right now.
Okay. Looks like we're gonna have a spot here in the Venom. It'd pretty much just be pure defending here. And I would expect a pretty aggressive c-bet strategy from our opponent. Size looks good.
Oh boy, he's looking to raise, folks.
Yeah,
not.
I think both call and raise are viable options here. Like, you know, if we're going to be raising with flushes in the spot, which I think we should be at least some of the time, we need to have some semi bluffs here as well. And I think most of those hands are going to be, you know, one spade hands, obviously, and queen of spades is a pretty strong hand, I would say here. Also, like, we're not like so sad if we check raise here and he jams. Like, our hand doesn't have like so much equity that, you know, we're going to be really crying if he if he ends up 3-bet jamming versus our check raise, and it's also a pretty big win for us. If we can just take the pot down with queen high versus a pretty strong range here, especially on a board where we expect him to c-bet relatively aggressively. So I think we can really do no wrong. I would definitely mix in some check raise and check call here. Pretty nice turn. And we'll go to the commentary on the ace king in a little bit, but we'll finish this one real quick. Ooh, tank call.
Oh, he got you.
Yeah, it looks like he was wondering if he had a value raise, which I don't think he does because this board
What do
is.
you have? 9 of clubs, 8 of. Oh, he's got 9-8 suited.
Yeah, yeah. So yeah, throw. I guess Max, if you want to throw in your 2 cents about this hand overall.
Well, it seems fine when he checks the turn. Like he most likely doesn't have a king because he'd be defending a king or protecting a king for the most part. So, I mean, when he does check back turn, he's got enough like value hands that you can get, or enough hands that you can get value from that. I think your bet size is solid. Like a lot of hands like, you know, 10-8. You know, he has like 10-8 suited, Jack-8 suited, like Ace-8 suited, stuff like that that'll call. So it makes a lot of sense to bet. And bet, I think you bet like 40% pot, which is about right.
I think he blocked like third pot here. You saying that under the gun has like 10-8 suited and Jack-8 suited?
Is that what he opened? He opened
Yeah,
under the
he
gun.
opened under the gun.
Oh, I thought this was blind on blind.
No. He opened an EV and we defended big blind here.
Oh, so the range is a little bit tighter, I guess.
Right. So he doesn't really have.
And we blocked jacks, so it's like maybe tens. Yeah, I guess it's a little thinner when it's an under the gun open, but I mean, he still does have like some other pairs, like 6s and 7s that. I guess those don't really call though. I guess maybe I would just check. I would probably just check call. I thought this was blind on blind, so if it's under the gun open and us calling in a big blind, just because we might be. I mean, I guess blocker betting is fine.
Are we asking about the river right now?
Well,
Yeah.
Turn one check. I just did ICMizing this hand, so turn one check. We're asking what we're doing on the river here.
Well, just the overall, like how we play this hand overall. So we check
Yeah.
flop.
I mean, I think like you said, I think that check raising the flop that's kind of what I was leaning a little bit towards here, but I don't think check calling is necessarily bad. But like you said, I think check raising, you kind of do block out as king, queen, king, jacks. You have the queen of spades, so you have a pretty strong hand. Like you said, if you get 3-bet shoved on, you're just going to fold pretty easily. Take control of the pot a little bit, and yeah, I just feel like it plays a little bit better. You have a lot of, you obviously have a queen of spades, backdoor flush draw, or not a backdoor flush draw, queen of spade flush draw. That's going to be very strong if it hits a lot of the time. There's only going to be one flush that beats you. Yeah, and I think he's going to be c-betting very large part of his range on this flop, if not his whole range, because he does have the range advantage on this board probably when he's opening under the gun and you flatten the big blind. So yeah, probably lean slightly towards check raise the flop.
Okay,
And then,
but the rest.
Go ahead.
Yeah, theoretically, if you get to the spot where you just call, what do you do on the river?
Right.
Yeah,
right.
probably just check. I think you have enough showdown value where, maybe a small blocker bet would be the only other option I could think of. I don't really know if you're going to get a king X to fold, I guess. And you're probably not going to get value from worse hands. So, I mean, you do block the straights, which is really nice, and he checked back the turn, so he never has a flush, or almost never has a flush. So probably just check makes the most sense.
I mean, his blocker bet does save him some money, though. I mean, this guy probably bets pretty thick on this river. But when Kurt bets third pot, it puts the guy in a weird spot.
There's not that many value hands he really should be betting on this river, though. Like, I don't know how many value hands he's going to be betting on this river, like a 9-8 maybe. He should bet king-queen on the turn. He should bet pocket aces on the turn, like maybe a king-jack, let you block that out. Maybe a king-10 with like a king-10 or something. That's kind of a hand I could see, like king-9. I don't know. I don't know if there's much of a point of blocker bet, but I like to hear what Kurtz thinks about it.
Yeah. Okay. So I think it, only really gets interesting here on the river, of course, and it seems to be the debate whether or not we want to be betting or checking here. And I think actually the interesting part happens on the turn because once he checks back on the turn, he is going to be lacking a lot of those stronger hands. Like he should be betting all of his flushes here on the turn, most of his king queens, his sets. He might have some king X in his check back range, but that's going to be a pretty small part of it. So the biggest thing here is that on the turn, even though our opponent has a pretty strong range from under the gun, and we expect him to c-bet the flop pretty aggressively, once he checks the turn, a lot of those strong hands really aren't going to be in his range anymore. So I think equities are going to shift a fair amount once all those strong hands are no longer in his range, because he would just normally end up betting those hands on the turn. When he checks, he's going to have a much weaker range than he should. Like I said, his strongest hands are going to be maybe he checks back some king 10 of diamonds, something like that at a low frequency. And maybe he has, so at the strongest, he probably has like some ace queen that he was c-betting flop that we're losing to, and some slow played king X here that's just trying to pot control on what's a relatively wet board, because even if he has a hand like ace king no spade and he gets check raised on the turn, you're in a pretty gross spot. But he also has a ton of equity to protect here. So overall, once he checks on the turn, he doesn't have a very strong range, and I also don't think there's a ton of hands that we're losing to. And so for that reason, I think, like I said, equities shift quite a bit in our direction, I would say. So I think we get to do a fair amount of betting here on the river now that most of his strong hands are out of his range. And I still think that we definitely get value from worse hands. Like he's going to have pocket sevens with a spade, pocket tens with a spade. He's going to have jacks, tens with a spade. He's going to have some queen 10 of diamonds he was c-betting flop with. So there's definitely hands that we get value from here on the river. And I actually really like his block bet size here too, because for one, this hand isn't worth a big bet, I don't think. And for two, I would also be block betting here with some flushes as well to try to not only get him to call with weaker hands, since like I said, once he does check the turn, he's going to have a lot of weaker hands here. So if we just bet really big, more often than not, he's just going to be able to fold like those real marginal hands, like the pocket sevens, pocket sixes with a spade, the ace eight of hearts. All those hands become a lot easier to fold when we bet really big here, as opposed to block betting here. So I really like the size. I think the hand's definitely strong enough where we can block or bet here. And I think the main thing that we need to be looking here is that once our opponent checks the turn, a lot of these strong hands that we're really worried about aren't really in his range. And even the times he does wake up with like a king 10 or 9-8, he's still just calling when we end up throwing out a blocker bet, because this board not only is so wet, like he doesn't want to raise and get jammed on, but we can also be doing this with flushes here too. So he has to be relatively cautious in this spot too. So not only do we get better hands worse hands to call us here, but we also kind of set the price where if we just check here, he might like bet a hand like king 10 or 9-8. He might bet like 2/3 to pot here on the river in this spot. So I think we also set our price when there's like very few times that he does end up having the best hand. I think this hand overall was pretty well played by Joe.
So you like the check on the river? Or you like blocking?
No, he likes block betting, and I kind of agree. Even though it's like a narrow range, it's still a range that makes a lot of sense. Like tens and sevens with a spade, like makes a lot of sense. So like,
what Joe did on the river. Did Joe put a blocker bet on the river?
He did. He did block bet river.
Sweet.
So, and I think now that we're talking about that, I think that when we do check here, he's almost always checking like those pocket sevens, pocket sixes, ace eight of hearts, pocket tens, pocket jacks, queen 10, like all those hands, he's probably just going to check back, and then so I think we make more money by block betting here and trying to get called by those weaker parts of his range than we do by checking and like inducing bluffs or him value betting a worse hand. You know what I mean?
Yeah, makes sense.
Yeah.
Makes sense for sure.
Joe, do you want to throw in your 2 cents for how you play this hand or what you were thinking?
Nope, you about nailed it.
Yeah. Overall, I'd say you're the one who nailed it since you're the one who played it. So yeah, overall, I think this hand is very well played on Joe's part here. So I think we had an ace king.
Before we fire up real quick, let me just say from the sevens hand, I just ICMized it. 0.4 bigs, it's winning by shoving there, and I kind of adjusted the ranges a little bit to make the opener a little bit tighter opening range. So it's kind of interesting. It says 6-6 is winning like 0.1, so very little, but like 5-5 is break even, and then 7-7 is winning like I think I said plus 0.4, either 0.3 or 0.4.
So 4/10 of a big blind.
So sevens is a slightly profitable shove. I mean, it's winning 0.4 big blinds per shove.
Right, and then the other thing we have to take into account is that ICMizer is just telling you, if a hand is profitable as a jam, not necessarily if like that's the best option. You know what I mean? So I think that's kind of where the charts kind of like help us out, but it's still good to run those spots because, like I said, I'm not surprised to hear that it's winning a little bit of money here. But I think the other things we need to take into account are the rest of the players that we have to act, the tight opening range, and so
for sure,
interesting.
I mean, maybe I'll check the charts too, just to see what they're saying too.
The chart's flat 100%. So
okay.
And like I said, like I definitely think it's winning as a jam. Like there are going to be a lot of hands that win as a jam, but those aren't necessarily like the best plays that we can be making. So it's definitely good to take that into consideration as well, and it's good. That's why you want to have your pre-flop calculators as well as some pre-flop charts, so you can kind of play those off of each other. And a lot of those charts are obviously made up from being able to calculate these specific spots here too.
Let me just say the chart real quick, because it's kind of interesting. So 6-6 is a call half the time, and then a fold half the time. 7-7, like you said, it's a call about 90. It's a call about 90% of the time, but also it says raise to 5,000, like a very small amount, which is so interesting to me.
So this is what I have here for 20 bigs.
Yeah, that's what I see too.
How I was supposed to be playing this. So
you see, like the little bit of pink in the sevens is just kind of interesting. That it wants you to occasionally raise to 5,000.
Yeah. So essentially, like if a play is this low frequency, I'm just not making it. You know what I mean?
Right.
So and that's just kind of how I use every approach with every single solver that I use. Like if it's such a low frequency play, I'm just not going to be using it because again, we're not computers. I think it's better for us to simplify things for ourselves. And like I said, if something's a much more high frequency play, then I would absolutely consider it. But if it's just barely getting in there, then I don't think it's really relevant to try to incorporate that into our own games. So, and I guess so. The point I was making as well about whether or not a hand is profitable enough to jam or call. Like obviously ace queen is going to be a profitable jam, as it shows from the charts, but there's also other things to take into consideration, like the fact that it plays really well post flop, the fact that if we call here, we can allow somebody else to jam ahead of us to squeeze jam, and then we have a really easy call with the ace queen as well. So these are also things that charts are taking into consideration that a program like ICMizer isn't going to tell us. It's just going to tell us whether or not a hand is profitable enough to jam or not. So that's why it's kind of good to play off the charts as well, to kind of take these things into consideration and know that's why the chart wants to, like I said, it wants to flat a little bit with ace queen to potentially let somebody else jam with a worse hand. It's not because it's not strong enough to jam in there, you know what I mean? So it's definitely good to consider, or to have both to end up considering for sure. So yep, we can move on. Looks like we have the ace king here, the bottom right. Opening up from MP, it looks like, getting called from the hijack and the big blind. So overall on this board, multi-way, I think this board is going to be checked very high frequency, or at least it should be. If I see somebody betting on a board like this, I'm going to assume it's either a really strong draw or a really strong pair, because I don't think there should be almost any betting going on a board like this. So yeah, 6, 7, 9. Thanks, Joe. I do see it's a little difficult to see here. But in general, the 6-7-9 board, multi-way is not going to be bet very much. So I'd basically be checking my range on a board like this. And this play also doesn't exist. This guy just jamming close to 3x pot into 2 opponents here. And obviously we have a very easy fold. Looks like bottom left, we defended big blind versus cutoff open and button call. We're going to have a pretty easy fold there as well. So we will move on to the top right, where we're defending 27 big blinds versus the cutoff open with 7-6 off. I think this is standard as well. So it looks like we're going to see a whole lot of action here. Top left, I guess we can comment on this, since it doesn't look like anything's really happening on the top right here. I'd probably just be giving up here. Maybe end up. Yeah. So this is probably okay. Well, I guess we will comment on this. Yeah, I guess Max and Steve, you can throw in your 2 cents, and you guys can tell us in the chat here what do you think about this turn bet after flop goes check check.
Yeah,
Interesting.
probably not the biggest fan of it. I mean, if you're betting here, you're probably going to be bluffing off kind of like all your hands in this spot, or most of them, I would imagine. I usually don't bet here, like almost ever. Yeah, I think that when he checks back the flop, I mean, his hand is screaming of like, I guess like a medium equity hand between like an ace high and like maybe like a pocket 8s or like a pocket 5s or maybe like a jack X that he's occasionally checking back, like a weaker jack X. So like there's probably a good chance you get him off the hand, but I don't really usually put in a bet here.
Okay. Max?
Yeah, I mean, I'm relatively averse to like no equity bluffs. But I guess like thinking about it, it's not necessarily bad, because I mean, like you said, Steve, you probably do move him off a lot of those medium to low equity hands that he has. And there's a lot that you can represent on a river here. So I don't hate it. And if a heart or a spade comes in, then you can obviously rep those. But he could also have backdoor spades if he's calling. I'd be probably more worried about that than hearts. We do have more of the range, more of the 4x range in our hands. So like, I guess if we're doing this, like I would probably put a pretty thick bet in on the river. Yeah, that's my thoughts.
Okay. So
if we are,
go ahead.
is it always?
Go ahead.
Here on the, yeah. Can you hear me?
There we go.
Okay, there we go. Yeah.
Yeah, the picture is like the is that.
You're breaking up big time.
Yeah. Sorry, Rhodesian, can't hear you. You're breaking up a bit.
It's funny, I thought that was JoeBeagles because there was dogs barking in the background, you know?
Carl, what are your thoughts on this?
All right. Well, for one, yeah, was it the Rhodesian type in? So yeah, go ahead and type in the training sessions what you were gonna say, or what you were gonna say, because you were breaking up a bit. But yeah, so immediately on this board, red flags would kind of raise for me, because I would expect my opponent to be betting this board almost 100% of the time. This is a super dry board. We're gonna have so much crap here, so he can essentially just bet his range. So when I see him check, like, I'm a little bit weary that he either has something that he's trying to show down and that he probably just doesn't understand the spot very much. So either he has like some sort of like weird slow play, or a hand like pocket 10s or pocket 9s he's checking back, or like a jack 8 or an ace high, really. So I think his range is probably just a little too strong in the spot, because he's either like slow playing in a spot where he should just be betting his range, or he has some sort of hand he's trying to get to showdown, and I don't really want to be bluffing into a range like that. Now, I'm not saying that this, like, we don't have some turn bets here, but I mean, we're gonna have so many better hands to semi-bluff here than, like, essentially with this hand, we're hoping, like, we're betting a no equity hand to hope that we get a river that we can represent, where essentially we have no chance to improve. So I'd say that's a bit wide. I mean, we have every single flush draw, every single straight draw. We have 10-8, we have Queen 8, Queen 10. I mean, we have every single straight draw as well. So like, there's so many better hands that we could be betting here than this one. So I think this is probably a bit on the thin side. And again, since I expect my opponent to like be betting his range here on the flop, once he checks, I'm essentially just checking my entire range here on the turn and kind of seeing what happens here. So I'd be doing that with my Jack X, my 4X, a bunch of draws here, because I just have no idea what he should have here, because I think he should just be betting every hand. So I'm a bit nervous. I think he probably has some sort of decent showdown once he checks on a board like this. So yeah, I think that the spot is a bit too thin. And if we were going to bet the spot, I think we have like so many better draws that we can be doing this. And essentially, like, we're betting here, hoping that a spade hits on the river and that we can represent a hand like, you know, like a flush, basically. So
this is what Rounder 63 would call rep mining.
Yeah, rep mining. Yeah. So
Rounder.
Yeah, definitely a bit on the thin side here.
Yeah,
So,
I agree.
So I'm kind of curious to see. I'm assuming we're going to get a call.
I feel like it's going to play out well for him, and we're going to look bad.
I mean, that's usually what happens.
Doesn't really look bad, but you know.
I've been contradicting myself quite a bit here lately. So yeah, not surprised by the call on the turn here. And I'm assuming, like, if we're betting this turn, we're probably bluffing on a card like this. Like, that's the only thing I can be thinking as to why.
Yeah, I mean, we have the 6 of spades blocker, I guess. So, like, I mean, at this point, I would probably bet pretty thick, like I was saying before. Like, on any card that fills any draw, I'd probably be going pretty aggressively.
Yeah, I agree, and I'm assuming that's what the plan is going to be here, but I think we're also kind of like compounding mistakes here at the same time. Like, we're kind of getting like, we're putting a lot of money in a pot that we probably shouldn't have invested any money on the turn. And like I said, we can check turn and still like bluff rivers here, but when we're betting turn to try to rep, like, hope a spade falls and rep a flush in this spot, I think it's probably a bit too thin, especially because we have a lot of better draws to end up doing this with. And if we're just barreling off with a hand like this, I think we're just going to have like way too many bluffs to not enough value. So yeah. And then at the same time, like, I'm a bit cautious because of his check back on the flop, when I think he should just be betting his range. So I also think we're probably bluffing too many hands into a range that's overall a bit too strong once he checks back flop. So I'm going to assume that we're going to see a bluff here on the river.
Ooh, a bluff shove. Doesn't work.
Yes,
it works.
So
Going for it seems like the move.
Yeah, so it's also interesting here on the river. Like, I was putting in these like big bet sizes here on the river. I don't know if they exist for the out of position player. Like, even with flushes, I really want to run this one in Odin here. But like, so I've been doing this a lot as well. But I think I've seen over my studies as of late that we don't really have like a ton of overbet sizes as the out of position player here. I could be wrong about that, so don't quote me. I'm not 100% strong on that, but just from my recent studies, I've seen that on these cards that fill flushes on the river, we can have bigger sizes, but usually not anything bigger than like 80% to pot size bets in this spot. And again, I could be wrong. This might be a fun one to run in Odin just to see if I'm correct in that regard, because I've definitely like jammed flushes in this spot before. I've definitely jammed like ace-4 diamonds in this spot before. So I've certainly, you know, played the spot as Joe has here. So I'm kind of curious what we're supposed to be doing with our 4x and our flushes here on the river and what size is good. So maybe we can look over this one in Odin a little bit later. But yeah, overall, I'd actually really like to hear Joe's perspective on this hand, because this is something that I would never do. So I would at least like to hear what Joe's thought process was in this spot.
Yeah, I mean, I think that, you know, I don't like the turn sizing, but while it is kind of like throwing good money after bet, I think when we do bet the turn and we get this exact river card, we have to bluff. I think that Villain does have a decent amount of Jack X and 9X, and I've found a lot of... I have this guy, by the way, tagged as a recreational player.
Okay.
And so I just think that he'll probably be overfolding to jams on the whole. So I think that's why I went for this sizing. Overall, I'm not a fan of the way I played this hand in the slightest, but once I end up on the river, I guess it worked. So whatever.
Yeah, it works, so it's gonna be good, right? That's what I tell myself all the time. But yeah, I think so it's probably fine. Like you have him marked as a wreck, so maybe like you think he's a little bit weaker than he should be here. And obviously, like I said, if he's checking back this flop, he clearly doesn't have an overall understanding about how aggressive he can be on this board. So usually when I see that again, I'm usually just thinking that people aren't checking hands like 8-7 of diamonds here. I think most people are just betting with those types of hands to just try to take it down on the flop. You know what I mean? So when he does check, I'm assuming like we're really trying to either get him to fold off like a 9x here or a weak jack or some sort of ace high. Maybe he rivers like an ace 5. I don't know. But in general, I'm not really trying to overly stretch to make opponents fold hands where they have like a little bit of showdown value here. Like I've lost a lot of money bluffing, like overly bluffing into weaker players who I think have like decent showdown. So yeah. Overall, I mean, I think we can move on here anyway. But I would say overall, this is probably too thin. I mean, as played, like if you're gonna bet the turn, you probably have to bet this river. But I would also probably not be bluffing into a player like this very much. And then again, like if we check turn, we can definitely bluff on this river card. Like I think it makes way more sense to check turn, and then if he ends up checking again, that's going to define his range even more towards like he's probably going to end up betting a jack on the turn or maybe even a 9 on the turn. So if he checks twice, he definitely has a weaker range, and then we can just bluff a little bit more, specifically on this river card where we do block spades, because we can still like check turn with some jack X, we can check turn with some 4x, we can check with some flush draws here on the turn. So like we can definitely rep a little bit more, and then also we're not putting in a ton of money with a hand that really has no chance to improve at all, like once we start betting here on the turn. So yeah, interesting spot though. It's always kind of difficult to maneuver around these spots that basically shouldn't happen, because our opponent should just be betting every single hand on the flop, and then we check fold. So once he checks flop, it gets like we're kind of freestyling at this point. You know what I mean? Because this should just never happen really. So yeah, I think that's the most interesting part of this hand overall. So but yeah, you won the hand, so well played. Looks like we have. Oh, we didn't comment on the queen jack on the top left. I think you can definitely call or 3-bet in that spot. We obviously folding to a cold 4-bet. So bottom right, we are about 35 bigs effective, facing middle position open. We're in the small blind with pocket tens. What are you guys doing here?
Yeah, let's get the room. Interesting one.
Yep, 35 effective, facing an MP open. We're in the small blind, pocket tens. We calling, we raising, we folding.
Let's not get carried away.
Just gonna throw it out there, just in case. Slammers jamming. You also have to be to consider the big blind, because the big blind has us covered. So if we jam here, we would effectively be jamming 60 bigs in case the big blind wakes up. He 2.5x opened. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean 2.6 if you want to be picky.
Stickler.
I mean technically 2.61, Kurt.
Well, I'll bust out the calculator next time.
So jams. It's kind of an interesting one. I'm like really on the fence on this. It's a close spot. All right, so slammer is. She says she's ripping it. JoeBeagles says is 3-betting, planning to call if original raiser jams. So there's just usually 3x 3 bets or jams.
Okay. Anybody else?
Yeah, waiting to see if anybody else comments.
Well, I guess while we're waiting, you can throw in your 2 cents.
Yeah.
Yeah, go ahead, Max.
Yeah, I mean, I would make it thicker here from the small blind. I mean, we're out of position. 10-10 plays okay post flop, but not great. So I'd probably lean towards something more of like a 4 to 4.5x 3 bet. Probably 2,200 to 2,500. Just because we're not like super excited to get flats here, and we'd rather force him to shove, or at least I would rather just induce a shove or force a shove to call off pre-flop. That's what I'd do.
Okay, Steve?
It's really close. This is like right on the fence for me. I with his sizing, it makes me honestly want to call a little bit more. I don't know if that should affect me too much. I feel like it's like either option could be profitable. I'm not honestly sure which is optimal. I know jacks I'd be for sure 3 betting. I know nines I'd be for sure flatting. So tens has to be somewhere in the middle there. I feel like you can kind of go both ways. My first instinct was saying flat, but I also don't really hate a 3 bet get it in with this opponent being on 35 big. So I don't know how many worse hands he's really going to jam on you, although he could flat still. And, I probably lean slightly towards flat, but I feel like either option could be profitable.
Okay.
If he was like one spot over, I'd like 3 betting a lot more. If he was like low jack, I think I'd be 3 betting almost every time. Hijack for sure every time.
Mm-hmm.
But this position might play a little bit more as a flat since it's UTG2. But it's close. It's definitely close to me. I can see like both options being profitable here.
Okay. Yeah, I think it's definitely like strong enough where we have to 3 bet for a couple of reasons. Well, for one, its overall hand strength is just good enough. I mean, we dominate so many hands. He's going to get it in with a few worse hands. Like he can 4 bet jam, like some pocket nines, pocket eights. Obviously, we're flipping versus ace king, ace queen, and then we just fold out like a lot of trash. That so not only like does playing out of position suck, which it clearly does, and this hand plays, pretty well post flop, but not great. Like not so great that we're like trying to, trap a hand like this. So I think it's overall strength. We definitely need to be 3 betting here. And then like another big reason is if we just call in the spot, then we give the big blind a pretty good price to come into the pot as well. And this hand is not necessarily going to play very well multi-way as it will in a heads up pot. And also, if we 3 bet here, we can easily stack off. Like, I mean, it does kind of suck because sometimes they're going to have better hands, but they're also going to be jamming hands that we're either flipping against or sometimes we are dominating. Like, don't throw out the option that somebody's going to have the random, ace 5 suited 4 bet jam. They're not going to rip 9s or 8s. And then, like I said, we are flipping against, ace king, ace queen, if they're ripping king queen suited, as they should be sometimes. So this hand definitely has enough equity to play for stacks. And between that, and then like not having to play the pot out of position if we just flat here, getting him to just fold like a random like ace 9 here or king jack offsuit is still like a decent win here as well. And also the fact that he did size up like slightly, like his raise size is fine obviously, but the bigger he raises, like the worse of a price we're getting. So like we win more money when we just take the pot down here as well. So overall, yeah, I think we have a mandatory 3 bet. I think it becomes closer in the big blind because I do agree, Steve, it is a bit on the close side here. But the fact that, like, if we're in the big blind, I like calling significantly more because we're closing out the action here and we don't have to worry about letting another player into the pot with a hand that's not necessarily going to play great multi-way. So, yeah, I would be pure 3 betting in this spot. And then, if he jams, we obviously have to call. We're not thrilled about it, but we're still, like, flipping and dominating enough to make this a profitable call for sure.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Okay.
It makes a lot of sense.
Looks like we are 3 betting here. Size is fine. And I mean, snap sucks, but we have to call. Wow, he just rips the aces, huh? Yeah, good note here. And this is kind of something that that I think I've preached in the past. Like, if somebody just snap does something like this, then okay, like let's say for example he has a hand like pocket eights, or he has a hand like ace jack offsuit, or just something that's a little bit close. Like, are they going to snap make a decision in that spot? No, they're probably going to take their time to think it over a little bit because the spot's really close. So when you just see somebody snap do it, I mean, it does suck that he has aces, but I would assume that his range is going to be a little bit stronger. That being said, I'm still never folding this spot here because he can just as easily do it with a hand like ace king or ace queen. But just in general, like, I would definitely put him on a bit of a stronger range and probably not put so many bluffs in his range here. So this is just another thing we try to tell you guys, like, take your time when you have these strong hands, because more than likely if somebody is just snap doing something, they more than likely just have a really good hand. Because if you have like a close spot or you have a bluff, chances are you're going to have to take your time to think about it a little bit. So you want to balance out your value range by making your opponent think that you have a close decision. You know what I mean? So, but yeah, in general, I mean, you have to call here, even though his range is a bit tighter, and probably a good note to be taken here. And also, I'm pretty sure his hand should be a high frequency, like, slow play in that spot. Now, the exception is if you think your opponent is never 3-bet bluffing, then yeah, just go ahead and 4-bet rip your pocket aces there, because if your opponent never has bluffs, then you may as well just get the money in. But if you're playing against somebody who has like a balanced 3-betting strategy, excuse me, and the stack to pot ratio is so small, aces is going to be a really good hand to end up slow playing and just letting your opponent bluff it off. And then also with a hand like pocket aces, like, a big part of your 3-bet bluffing range is going to be some like some weaker suited ace-x hands, like some ace-10 offsuit, some ace-jack offsuit. So when you have a hand like pocket aces and you just 4-bet jam like that, the chances are more than likely that you're going to get a fold because you block so much of your opponent's 3-bet bluffing range. So that's another reason why it is such a high frequency slow play in this exact situation. But then again, like I said, if you're playing in smaller games or you think your opponent never has like a 3-bet bluffing range, then go ahead and fast play your hand. But in my opponent's shoes there with aces, I am more than likely just flatting and trapping at such a low stack to pot ratio. So definitely just cooler in that spot. And of course that's going to happen. We can't be results oriented here. And then of course, like, you see our opponent 5xing the next hand immediately. So a lot can be said about this opponent. You know, just between like the snap 4-bet jam was bad enough, and then he immediately 5x raises. I think we can automatically mark this player as a recreational.
He has opposite notes of me. I have red as my reg and green as my fish, and it looks like because he has king and north as green, I think that's Hustler Groon. So you probably have opposite, Joe, as my. Kind of funny. Yeah, you have opposite notes to everyone. That's fun. So this is kind of an interesting spot here. Let's stop it right here, guys. What do you guys think of the king queen here?
Yeah, so we're in the cutoff, king queen offsuit. We're about 30 effective. We're facing a low jack open and a hijack call. What are you guys doing with king queen here? Yeah, 30 bigs effective. And for what it's worth, like, these spots are always a bit on the tricky side. And I say we can freestyle a little bit more in these spots than necessarily like what the charts tell us, because we do have 2 different ranges in there. So just kind of knowing what population is doing, we can like make our own decisions in this spot and not necessarily like blindly follow the chart. I mean, we're never doing that in general, but it definitely gets a lot more interesting when there's 2 opponents in the pot, and depending on player tendencies, how many hands they're flatting, how many hands they're V-pipping in general, is going to really make a big difference in the decision that we end up making here. So just to let you guys know, it's these spots are very difficult, so don't be afraid to, like, you know, chime in with an answer that might not be right, because I don't think we have the end-all be-all answers here either. Fountain Fletch jamming. Kenny's shoving or folding. Not much calling here. Some of the games I play, and a lot of the times, these see the flop. With that bet, no more money has to go in. Red Mick is folding. Okay, Max.
Yeah, I mean, it seems pretty split, and I actually think it's, I think I agree with everybody that I wouldn't flat here very often. Just because you sort of open a squeeze spot for everybody else behind you, and like, I guess we are in position, or you know, from the cutoff, we're in decent position, but I don't feel like we're going to end up in a great spot here if we just flat. And what are we, 30 bigs deep? Like, that's a decent spot to squeeze shove ourselves. So I would probably, I mean, I don't think I'd do one or the other every time. I think I would, and I'm going to say this for you, Kurt, and for everybody else, I'd probably roll here.
There he is.
I'd probably lean towards, well, I'd probably just go 50-50 with it, honestly, and just roll.
Rolling. All right, Steve.
Yeah, I think I would be shoving here usually. I think that King Queen plays pretty strong and blocks out a lot of their strongest hands, like Ace King, Kings, Queens. I think that the guy in the hijack, even though his range is a little bit stronger, I think he's going to be 3-betting most of his Ace Queens, most of his Ace Kings, most of his like stronger hands overall. I mean, maybe you could flat like a pocket aces occasionally here. I think he's even still at this stacked up, probably going to be 3-betting at a decent amount. I think a lot of his range in the hijack is probably a lot of pairs, maybe like a Jack 10 suited, Queen Jack suited, hands like that. Yeah, I think it also, I just don't see another great option for it. I mean, maybe 3-betting, but I kind of hate 3-bet folding in this spot. And I think there's just enough money in the pot where taking it down is just going to be good. And like I said, you block out a lot of the strong hands. They're opening in relatively late position. Yeah, I don't really see I'm not like pumped about shoving, but I don't know if there's a better way to play it here. So that's probably what I would go with here.
Okay. So in general, I think we need to look at a couple things here. Now, if we call here, we're definitely calling with a capped range, because we're never calling with hands like Ace King, Pocket Jacks, Pocket Aces, stuff like that. I think we're always squeezing with those hands. So when we do call here, we're definitely calling with a capped range, which is fine, because there's definitely going to be hands that we can call with, but we at least have to be aware that we are calling with a capped range. So that might encourage somebody else to end up ripping in a spot where they know there's at least one player with dead money out there who doesn't have a very strong hand. So we definitely have to be aware of that, to the fact that we can be opened up for somebody to end up squeezing when we have a capped range ourselves here. So, and the other point that I want to make is that these offsuit hands, even though we're a little bit shorter stacked, are still not going to play very well in multi-way pots here. So we're a little less incentivized to be flatting with the offsuit variety, and maybe end up V-pipping. Like with King Queen suited, we're obviously never folding. It just becomes whether or not we're calling or squeezing or jamming. So I would definitely, like, this hand would be opponent dependent for me. If we have a couple tight opponents in this pot, I might just straight up fold here. But if we have some more loose aggressive players in the pot, like maybe one person's opening too much, the other guy's flatting too much, I'd be much more incentivized to end up squeezing in this spot. Like, this hand, I think, like, has a greater reward by just like squeezing and potentially stealing the pot, as opposed to a hand like King Queen suited that plays a little bit better multi-way, and you're kind of in a gross spot if they if you get 4-bet jammed on. For the price, you probably still have to call it off with all the money in there. But just real quick, I want to take a look at the chart here just to kind of show you guys what they do. And again, these are just the charts I end up using. So it says it's a bit indifferent. I think, like what Max said here, it does all three options. It's doing a little bit of calling and a little bit of squeezing, and then it's also folding. So I think the folding comes from what type of opponents you're going up against. So if you're going up against a couple players who are a bit on the tighter side here, then it probably isn't strong enough to end up V-pipping. But essentially, I would take out this call spot here and just end up full frequency 3-betting here, because again, these offsuit varieties really don't play very well multi-way. So that's why you even see hands like Ace-Jack are just like basically bluff raising or folding because they don't play very well multi-way. And then you see a little bit more calling from the suited variety. But overall, there's not like a ton of flatting going on here. We're only calling 3.5% of our range, and we're squeezing. We're either squeezing or jamming with the other like 8% of our range here. So we're definitely doing a lot more 3-betting or jamming as opposed to just flatting in this spot. And obviously, like that's because it sucks playing pots multi-way. And then we're just going to have hands that are good enough to end up getting the money in. And we're also like in a position where we can win more money because there's more money in the pot with 2 players. So I think where it becomes interesting are what hands that we want to be 3-bet jamming with and what hands we're 3-betting for the non-all-in size. And essentially, like King Queen is playing as a steal here. So, and that's mainly because when it does jam, more often than not, when we get snapped, we're getting snapped by hands like Ace King and Ace Queen that have us dominated. So, like when we do get the money in, it's like more common that we get ourselves into a dominated spot. And I think that's why it mainly wants to play as a 3-bet bluff, because I think, like Steve said, like we do block some of the better hands, but when they 4-bet jam, the hand does not really play very well when called or when it gets all in. So I think that's why they want to play King Queen as more of a steal. And then it just like that's why, like for example, Queen Jack just wants to rip here. And that's when, because when Queen Jack gets called, like it does well versus like pocket 10s, pocket 9s, and also Ace King snaps it off. So if a hand like Ace King snaps it, then it at least has like 3-2 equity in this spot. So it's not quite as bad as a hand like King Queen. When that hand gets snapped, it's more likely that it's dominated. So these are just little things that you want to take into consideration when you're looking at your charts and kind of.
I want to make a comment real quick because I had the same thought honestly as Found and Flood, that like I thought King Queen off would be more of a jam and King Queen suited would be more of a flat, and it's the chart's actually saying the opposite. So that's kind of interesting to me. I actually was kind of thinking the opposite of what the chart was saying in this spot in terms of the suited, not suited.
Okay, and I think the main thing that comes from that is because when a hand like King Queen does get snapped, and then like I said, it's more often than not it's getting snapped by Ace King, Ace Queen. So at least if you have King Queen suited, you have a little bit more equity when you're called by a hand that dominates you, because there's more potential for you to run out flushes in a spot like that. So if it is going to jam a hand, it wants to jam with the suited variety, because those chances where you do end up waking up in a dominated situation, you at least have some flush equity to end up taking to the flop, and then I guess you're like doing well enough if you do get called by a hand like Ace Jack or 10s or 9s, stuff like that. So in general, King Queen is just like not a fist pump call in this spot, and I think the main thing that we want to take from here is that when we do play pots multi-way, the offsuit varieties are not going to play nearly as well as the suited varieties, and for 30 bigs, like the hand's just like strong enough to end up jamming here. So and definitely a spot I don't think many people are really nailing very much, again, because I think people are just like doing way too much flatting here. So, and just one more time, we do see that we are squeezing to calling almost. It's like 2.5 to 1 basically. So there's just a lot more squeezing that's going on in these positions than there is jamming, or than there is calling, I would say. So,
do you mind if I add something?
Sure.
Just ran this in Odin's pre-flop simulator, just out of curiosity. And it seems to think that we fold 75% here, King Queen off, and 3-bet not all in the other 25%.
So
but King Queen suited.
There's another thought that I had. You could 3-bet pretty thick, and I mean, or not thick, but like you could 3-bet bluff, and fold to a 4-bet shove. I mean, like it's an option.
It's suggesting 7.8 bigs.
Right, something that is not making so big that it can potentially get away, and that you're also not giving it somebody such a good price to end up calling in this spot. So, yeah. And again, I think it likes bluffing this hand because it. At all. What's up?
No, go ahead.
Yeah. Well, I was going to say it has good blocker components to some of the strongest hands. So that's why I think it likes playing the hand as either a fold or a 3-bet bluff. But again, it doesn't end up jamming because when called, it's doing like pretty poorly overall. So I think it's important to notice that it's a decent option to end up squeezing because it is blocking the top of our opponent's potential 4-bet jamming range. But also, it's not quite strong enough to either flat or just jam for all the chips because it's just not a strong enough hand when we're going up against 2 opponents instead of just 1. So, interesting things to note here for sure.
Very interesting spot.
We'll see what Joe did. Yeah, and again, I think with these, and this is not like a punt or anything, but just as a general rule of thumb, like we don't want to be playing in multi-way pots very much, specifically with offsuit combos, because they just don't play very well post-flop. So I would definitely at least play this hand as a squeeze or a fold, depending on my opponents. And then again, like we set ourselves up to get squeezed, because when we do just call here, we definitely have a capped range here, so we're just never going to the flop with a strong hand if we face like a 3-bet here. So yeah, definitely an interesting spot, and just little things to take a note that these offsuit hands really don't play very well in multi-way pots. So if you guys can just remember that, I think you'll be doing pretty well. Obviously, heads up, the hand is definitely strong enough to be continuing, but multi-way, the value of these offsuit combos really go down quite a bit. Oh, Joe's beaking a little bit, huh?
Nice.
Okay, break time. I don't know if he stopped the footage or... Okay, so we'll just go through. And Joe, I think you said we have a... Oh, no, I thought this was a satellite here, but it looks like a... Is this a satty on the bottom right? I feel like you said you had a...
No, that's the softest 150K of the month. Of like, I think they run that once a week or something like that.
Okay, because I think he told us earlier that he had a satty that popped up on Ignition, but I didn't know if this was like the actual 150K or if it was a satty to the 150K, because I don't see satty anywhere. So
definitely looks like the real deal there.
Okay. All right, so top left we have an open with the pocket sevens. This is in the Venom as well. Oh, we'll cold 4-bet now. So, yeah, I would assume we're just going to be calling here if we didn't face cold 4-bet.
This is a classic
Venom spot.
This is a classic Venom spot, by the way.
Kenny, what are you winning tonight?
What's up?
What are you winning tonight?
I'm not sure, man. I'm just trying to study today, probably.
Right. I think I'm going to see you at the tables tonight. You know, just have a feeling.
It's possible. It's always possible.
I never know you're playing, and then you just out of nowhere, like, yeah, dude, I'm 7 of fucking 40 in this big tournament. You know.
Yeah. I don't like to do too much talking.
Show up with like a final table.
Yeah, I like to just get the job done as much as possible, you know?
Yeah. I feel you. Like, there's been a few nights where I'm like, oh, I wonder if Kenny's playing. He's probably not playing tonight. Then I get a message from you like 20 minutes later, like, oh, I'm deep in this tournament, you know? I think it's happened like 3 times at least.
Okay, so we got a spot in the Venom here. We opened EP with the ace-5 suited. We're about 50 effective. Got called by the button in the big blind, and we've got the ace-king-10 flop. So let's see. I'm assuming this checks to us.
With an uncapped range, we basically have to continue here, I would say, 100% of the time. Do you disagree?
I guess we'll have everybody else throwing their 2 cents here. What are you guys doing on the flop here against 2 opponents? Facing the button in the big blind, we open from early position. We're 50 bigs deep. You guys betting? You checking? If you're betting, what size are you betting? Top left slammer. This is in the Venom. Kenny's betting a third. Rhodesian's betting a third. Whack-a-Bum's betting a third. Starting to see a trend. PMC, 25%.
I'm going to be the only one that's weird here.
No, I mean, Max, I'm going to be too, so don't worry. I'm not betting a third.
Joe's betting 32%. Okay, switching it up. Very nice.
DMC is betting 25%. I think he just said that, though, to be different.
I think that's fine. Just anything between 25 33% is probably probably fine.
Yeah.
Final Flood, I think I check or bet something around 55 or 66% if he's betting. Okay.
I was hoping somebody would answer that because I think that in this case, I think enough people have answered, right?
Yeah, go ahead.
I think in this case, we don't want to give the button an opportunity to put pressure on us because if we bet third pot, I feel like this hits their range and their semi-bluff range a lot. So like if we're betting third pot, I think we're opening ourselves up to get raised quite a bit by the button. So and I don't hate the idea from Found and Flood to check and maybe look to bluff catch a little bit here and see if we can call down on decent runouts. But I also don't hate betting 2/3 pot and I guess representing a little more strength than we actually have just to steer the button away from raising a bit. That's my thoughts.
Okay. Go ahead,
My
Steve.
thing is, I don't know that I'm betting 2/3 with my strongest hands. So I feel like by sizing up here, I'm not sure what I'm really. I don't know. Maybe I'm lost in my own thoughts there.
I'll make my point. I wasn't even going to bet. I was planning to check here. Everyone's saying a third pot, so it's interesting. I'm curious to hear what's going on. I just think it's. I think maybe it's slightly strong enough to bet because you're going to get called with them king queens, king jacks, some lower flush draws. But it's also not a hand you're ever really going to get 3 streets on. You're probably going to get 1 street, maybe 2, sometimes with certain hands. There are a lot of bad turns, so I guess that might be one of the reasons to bet, but I'm leaning check on this board.
I think check opens up the opportunity to bluff catch on decent runouts and also pot control in spots where maybe we can get a check through and look to get 2 streets of value. Because I agree with you. I don't think this is a 3 streets kind of hand. We're looking for like the dream run out to get 3 streets.
Yeah, he's definitely not 3 streets unless it was just like a really sick.
Or like a 5x deuce, run out or something that.
Yeah, something. Even then you still could be not necessarily ahead. You still could be behind to a few other hands. So I think I'm leading check, but I could see some arguments for a small bet here too.
Like if I'm sitting here on the button with Queen 10, Jack 10, King Queen, King Jack, like I think this is a great opportunity to raise any bet from our position. So I think I would do my best to avoid giving them that opportunity.
It's really possible. I don't think enough people are going to be doing that at like lower stakes or anything. But I mean, this is a 2600 Venom. So
in the Venom, you're going to see that quite a bit. I do agree with that.
I didn't see the tournament for a second. Yeah, I still think I'm probably just checking. But let's hear Kurt. We got a lot of mixed opinions on this one.
Yeah, this is all over the place. I like this.
Yeah, and
I don't think anybody's really wrong.
So there's a few things going on, and again, like a lot of this just comes from my experience and a couple multi-way sims I've seen. So don't take everything I say to heart here because I've only seen a few. But a couple things I do know from these multi-way sims is. Well, I guess I'll address what Joe said first, is that he's going to third pot because he's betting range, so he's usually betting third pot or less if you're betting range, which I think is an accurate assessment. If you are betting range, it's going to be for a smaller size. But the first point I want to bring up is that although this is a very good board for us, I mean, we have all aces, we have all pocket kings, we basically have all the nuts in our hand. But we also have to take into consideration that we're going up against 2 opponents instead of just 1 here. So that immediately is not going to allow us to bet our entire range here because whenever we're going up against 2 opponents, we can't be c-betting as wide for value and we can't be we can't be betting draws as wide as we would, as well as just on like, you know, complete airball hands. So that's because we have two ranges that we need to go through here, basically. So that's always going to have us tighten up a little bit more, even on these boards that are better for us. So first thing we need to take into consideration here is that even though the board is so great for us, we can't just, there's very few spots where we're just going to be c-betting range into multiple opponents. So that's the first thing to take into consideration. The second is, I think I would definitely, you know, shocker, I would roll here because the board is so good for us. I absolutely think we get some bet on this board. This hand could also, like, definitely needs protection versus flush draws versus king jacks versus jack tens, you know, things like that. So there's definitely merit in doing some betting here. But we also have a hand that is kind of puking if it gets check raised. I also don't think it's nearly strong enough where we just need to immediately start piling in money here. It's also good to have some stronger hands in our check back range here. Like, I think if we're just betting every single ace in our range here, when we check back, that our range is just like going to be too weak. So, and I know like Joe's obviously betting his entire range, so he's not going to have to worry about checking back here, but I also think it's good to address that we probably shouldn't be betting range, even on a board like this, into multiple opponents. So my standard here would probably be to check. And I guess I'll address what you said about, you know, wanting to bet bigger max because you don't want your opponent raising. I'm not necessarily thinking that my opponent's going to be raising here on the button for the same reasons like I said. Like, our opponent knows, like, he's on the button, we're opening from the tightest position on the table. So I don't necessarily see our opponent, you know, raising too aggressively, even though we bet really small, because he knows that we have all pocket aces, pocket kings, all ace kings, and then all queen jacks, all pocket tens. Like, he has some of those hands, but he doesn't have all of them. So he can't necessarily just, like, go out of his way to, like, you know, put in some wild, like, 3-bet or some wild raise here just because he thinks, like, our small bet represents like a weaker range, because it absolutely doesn't. Also, I think if he did raise with like some stronger hands here, I think our fold would become pretty easy, because not only is he raising versus a super tight position, but he also has another player to act in the big blind who can definitely have hands like ace 10, king 10, queen jack, you know, flush draws, you know, all these hands. So I actually wouldn't expect, even versus a smaller bet, for the button to be doing a whole lot of raising here. And then I guess I'll address the size. I think if we are going to be betting here, and usually in multi-way spots, smaller sizes are the most common size you would see. And that, again, goes back to us not necessarily wanting to put in a whole lot of money when we're facing two different opponents, because we have to go through two different ranges. There's not only two different people that can have stronger hands than us, but we have two different ranges that can have like really strong draws here too. So I think overall, there's just not a whole lot of big betting that's going on in these multi-way spots. So, yeah, that's another point that I wanted to address there. So I'm trying to think if there's anything else that we needed to talk about that we kind of address here. So, yeah, overall, I would not be c-betting my range here. I would definitely be betting sometimes. I think this hand needs a fair amount of protection, but we're also relatively deep here. We're 50 bigs deep. There's going to be a lot of gross turns here. So if I'm betting this flop, I'm essentially checking every single turn. Like even a 5, I would check here quite a bit, depending on which one of our opponents, you know, ended up calling here, because the board's just so wet, and we don't have a hand that necessarily, even if it comes like, you know, 5 of clubs, deuce of clubs, like I don't even know if we necessarily have 3 streets with a hand like that, because what worse hand is going to be calling us down in a spot like that? Like, I think our opponents can definitely.
Yeah, exactly. That's why I like the idea of checking. It just simplifies things.
Right.
In a relatively difficult spot.
Right. And then I think also, like, if we end up betting big in this pot, I think it's going to be pretty easy. Like, if I'm on the button shoes and I call with ace 4 of clubs and I see under the gun bet 2/3 pot here, I'm just folding. Like, I don't think that our opponent is going to have enough bluffs in his range to kind of counter his like big bet size. I think people use these big bet sizes just because they see like a really wet board and they want to get protection. But what they don't realize is that when they bet really big in these spots, they fold out that weaker part of their opponent's range that's going to be in a difficult spot if you bet on the smaller side. Because when you're just betting huge into 2 opponents, like, I'm just never giving anybody credit for anything less than like ace 10 plus, and then essentially like queen 9 of diamonds, jack 9 of diamonds, like the absolute strongest draws that we can have here. And I would definitely say they're probably more weighted towards value. So I'm like really making some really tight folds here. versus a big bet size from the under the gun position here, because I'm just not thinking that they ever have enough bluffs or semi bluffs to balance out their value range here. So yeah, definitely some interesting stuff here going on multi-way, and a lot of this is freestyling because there are multi-way solvers out there, but I'm not that studied in them, and I also think like a lot of people haven't quite got into them as well. And I think the multi-way solvers are still being perfected too, but it's always going to be more difficult again when you're going up against multiple ranges to try to like nail a hand. Like we have a difficult enough time going heads up with Odin, but now we're introducing another range. So there's a lot more freestyling going on in these 3 to 4 handed pots than there are in heads up pots. So we can just kind of do our best to make our best conclusions as to what our strategy should be here. So these are always fun to warrant discussions here for sure, and you can definitely see that from the responses that we got from the group here. Like everybody kind of had a different response here, and I think that's because these spots are so difficult to play in, and that there's so many variables going on when we have multiple opponents in the hand. So definitely an interesting spot. I don't know if anybody else wants to add anything real quick before we continue the footage here.
I feel like everybody sort of agrees that this is the 3 street spot. So I think if that's what we're looking at, and given our position, and assuming that the button is more likely to be the more likely caller, then I think that check is what my decision would be.
Mm-hmm.
Well, check for sure accomplishes pot control.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not as sure that it accomplishes simplifying the hand. Like, depending on what happens behind us, we still may just be in the grinder with ace-5, not really know what to do. Mm-hmm. I definitely think pot control here is not the worst thing in the world, especially if we're going to have difficult decisions on turns and rivers. But yeah, instinctually here, I'm probably still leading on the flop and then probably giving up on a decent amount of turns.
All right, I got a question. What would you do here with an ace-queen offsuit, ace-jack offsuit, let's say having a diamond or not in your hand? Where are you still, I assume you're still going to be checking a decent part of the range here, but tell me if I'm wrong.
Yeah, I mean, I'm going to be doing a little bit of checking with everything here. Like, I'm not betting my range in the spot at all. So, like, I'm going to mix with every single hand here. Like, obviously, I think if we were going between, like, would I bet ace-jack or ace-queen with a diamond more than ace-5 of spades? Yeah, of course. Like, it's a stronger hand, and it has more equity on turns and rivers. So, in general, I would probably choose to bet that hand, those hands a little bit more. But I would certainly be introducing a checking range there as well, and that's because
I guess I just want to make that point. I want to make that point because a lot of people are talking about betting the ace-5 here. I just want to make even a point that even ace-queen, ace-jack can be checked here. Not saying it's going to be checked here every time, but even you could lead with checks in like that kind of spot multi-ways. So just something to think about.
And I mean, I guess we want to go down that road. Like, are you guys ever checking pocket aces here, pocket kings, pocket tens, queen jack, flush draws, or are we just like pure betting those hands? I mean, maybe we kind of gave it away because I already said what I would do, but
yeah, I know you're going to say that you check them, like you said, you're checking a lot of your range here. I probably am betting those a little bit too much and maybe checking more of the medium strength part of my range in this spot. So maybe, I should be working in a little bit more checks with the top of my range, because I do notice in myself in these kind of spots checking with a lot of hands like this one, and maybe betting a lot with my queen jacks, pocket aces, all those hands, they're very strong hands. So maybe I should be working a little bit of more checks in with those hands.
You just spurred some inspiration in my head, because I definitely think that I'm checking some of the highest parts of my range here, like with pocket kings and stuff, occasionally 3-ways. Occasionally, which probably means I should be probably not just checking my best hands there and trying to rep better hands when I don't have it. I probably should be mixing a bit more here, but since we opened from under the gun and flop comes ace king 10, I mean, I'm assuming this hits our range harder than it hits our actual combination here, or at least some of it, which probably is why I wanted to continue here a bit. But if I get called from behind, I'm just in a really bad spot here.
Right, and that's a pretty good point that you made there, actually. So even though we have a hand that needs a lot of protection, there's so many bad turns and rivers. And then, like, let's say if we bet flop, button calls, big blind folds, and the turn comes a deuce of clubs, and we check to pot control, and our opponent bets 2/3 pot on the turn. Like, what are we doing? Like, do we feel comfortable check calling there? Or are we check folding? Like we're essentially bloating a pot with a hand that has very little relative hand strength, I think, against two opponents, and we're in kind of gross spots if we face aggression here. So yeah, like the bottom line is, I think we really want to be mixing here. And one more hypothetical I wanted to do here real quickly. Now, let's say we're in the button shoes and we have ace 10 of clubs here, and we call the C bet from our position, like from the early position here, and the run out is deuce of clubs, 4 of clubs, literally the cleanest run out that we could possibly see. But we're on the button with ace 10 of clubs, and our opponent triple barrels for the all-in size, 50 bigs deep. Are you guys happy to be calling down with ace 10 in a spot like this when our opponent C bets into 2 people and then triples off for 50 bigs? Like, are we happy to be calling with ace 10? I don't know. Maybe I'm a nit here, and maybe you guys are snapping, but
I mean, we're not pumped for sure. I mean, we're probably calling. We're not pumped, but yeah, I mean, maybe we're not super pumped about it for sure, especially on this board.
Right.
I'm not pumped about it, but it's probably opponent dependent. I definitely think there's like some.
Yeah, not pumping, not folding.
Yeah, there's probably some like queen high diamond hands and stuff like that have a bunch of equity that can get real aggressive here as well.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I don't know.
Yeah, so
I hate it, but I'm probably not folding.
Yeah, so the bottom line is, like, even with a hand as good as ace 10 in this spot, like, we're kind of puke calling, like, versus a triple barrel. So not only do we have to take that into consideration, but it takes a real, like, special type of player to, like, c-bet into multiple opponents and triple off with a bluff in our shoes here, basically. So if we're dreading to call down on that spot, I'm just going to assume that most people are not finding the bluffs in that spot. So I think that's also why it's good to kind of mix up your play a little bit and have some of those strong hands in your checking range, because I think like some people will be able to make some real hero folds in a spot like that, because you just also have to think about what you're getting called down with as well, and that most people are just not triple barreling in multi-way pots here too. So yeah, there's just a lot going on here for sure. And also, like, I think it's still good when we're this deep to throw in some check raises here to build a pot. I would actually be a little bit more highly incentivized to, like, c-bet range if we're 20 to 25 bigs effective, because for one, it's easier for us to stack off with like kind of like more marginal hands, and for two, like, we don't have to worry about like really bloating this massive pot here when stacks are so short. So I think the deeper the stacks get, the more we want to be incorporating some checks here, and the more shallow stacks are, the easier it's going to be for us to kind of stack off with more marginal hands. So I think that's the one point that I kind of forgot to mention in this spot too. I think the deeper stacks are, the more checking we do overall with our range, and then the more shallow they are, we can kind of bet a little bit more aggressively, because it's going to be easier for us to stack off with like an ace queen, an ace jack, an ace 10, you know, things like that, that we're not going to worry about like getting in these massive pots where we end up getting coolered. So yeah, some interesting stuff going on here. I guess we'll move on for now and see how Joe played it. Well, I guess we know we see betting flop. And again, if we are betting flop, I do like the size. I would never bet more than third pot in this spot. That's basically to keep our opponents weaker hands in their range, because if we just bet like really big here, then we just kind of fold them off, like some king 9 of clubs, some I don't know if like jack 10 of clubs ever folds here either, but okay. What do we think about this turn bet?
So what was the sizing on the flop that he went with?
Third pot.
Third pot.
Mm-hmm.
I'll let you guys. Are we asking the room right now, or asking us?
I mean, I guess we can just do us for now here. So I guess we want to wrap this hand up. It looks like this will probably be the last one before we kind of address some other stuff, and maybe we want to look at one specific hand.
We've got a little bit long on this hand. I agree.
Well, yeah. I mean, there's just so much going on.
Yeah. So yeah, Max, Ken, you want to say your piece here on the turn, and then I'll go ahead, and then Kurt could go.
Mm-hmm. Go ahead. Or no, sorry, Kenny. Go ahead.
Yeah, you can go first. My instinct here is confused. I don't like the fact that it's a heart. Also pairs the board. I mean, we are playing the king kicker now, which is kind of interesting. If the guy had like ace jack, ace nine, something like that, we're actually chopping now. I don't know that I'm betting. I'm probably check calling here, if anything.
Yeah, it's one of those weird spots. Like we're almost trying to fold out ace queen, ace jack, ace nine. You know, like with this bet, and I don't hate it. I don't hate that idea. I guess the size is a little heavy because you're sort of getting hands that you want to call to fold out to, like king jack, king queen. But it does sort of look strong.
I don't mind the sizing, frankly. I think out of position on the turn with 2 flush draws and this very wet board, I think I'm either checking or betting at least 2/3 here.
Yeah. I like the sizing. I like the sizing too. I think anything lower is a little bit. I guess if you're betting lower, you're sort of like repping aces or kings or something. But and I guess with this bet sizing, you're more repping protection betting. That you're not. Oh, but I mean, you might do this with aces and kings too to try to get max value. Jeez.
Definitely a tough, weird turn. I probably lean check. I guess I don't hate this either. I don't usually do this. I think this is a pretty low part of my range here when I'm betting the turn. I do still think he has a decent amount of 10x's in his range, and I mean, obviously there are going to be some 5 flush draws you get him off that you're not going to let him river with maybe like an 8-7 of diamonds, 9-8 of diamonds. Still could have like an ace-x of diamonds here. It's interesting. I probably lean check here, but also if you bet here, it kind of, I guess, like almost like polarizes the hand a little bit. If he's calling you here, he's probably going to have some kind of like 10x, ace-x, possibly of diamonds, like a bigger ace-x or possibly an ace-x of diamonds. And yeah, you might get him to fold some chops here. I probably don't bet here. I think I exclusively check in this spot, but I'm not sure if that could be a little bit of a leak where I maybe should be betting a little bit more. There could be some, I guess, like chops you're getting to fold. It's a little bit weird. Maybe you're getting some like 8-7 of diamonds that won't see the river, some 9-8 of diamonds, or, you know. I mean,
are you ever afraid of the flushes here, the flush draws? Like, is that a consideration in betting or sizing here?
Yeah, I think you're accomplishing multiple things by betting the sizing. Like you sort of want those flush draws to fold out. I guess, or at least make it a price that they're paying for it. And then you're sort of setting yourself up like on a brick river where you could like check bluff catch, and I don't hate that. Yeah, I don't hate the idea of betting 2/3 pot here. If he just calls, then check bluff catching the river. I guess that's where my head would be at. I don't hate the idea of trying to get chops to fold out either, where you'd more likely be betting. I think my general strategy would be towards bet, check calling, decent river cards.
Are there many 10 combos we can think of that the button would show up to the turn with here?
Yeah, absolutely. Jack 10, Queen 10.
Queen 10, King 10, Ace 10. He probably has all those. I mean, he doesn't have to raise Ace 10 on the flop.
Yep.
10, 10, 9. No, probably not 10, 9. No, 10, 9 of hearts doesn't make sense.
Not thinking about 10, 9, yeah.
It's not too many 10Xs, but there are a few at least.
Yep, I was curious what you guys thought, because I was thinking that through as well.
Like, I usually exclusively check here, but I'm open to. I wouldn't be surprised if it's like a bet in some regard too, for kind of some of the reasons we stated. What are you thinking, Kurt?
Okay, so
again,
take a second if you need.
Well, I'm trying to think of it in terms, because I know Joe said that he's betting his range here, which I'm not doing. So, like, if he's betting his range, he's going to show up with 10x here on the turn, obviously. But I would say for me, I'm not betting my range, so there's very few like 10x combos that I'm actually betting on the flop. And if they were like 10x combos, it would probably be like Jack 10 of hearts, Queen 10 of hearts, things that have both like gut shot straight draws with some backdoor flush draws. But obviously with the 10 of hearts on the turn, those hands don't exist. So in Joe's particular spot, if he's betting his range, he says he's betting every single hand. That means he's gonna show up with 10s here. But for myself, I just would never have 10x in this spot because I'm checking so much. I don't think like even it might be like super low frequency where you get to bet some Jack 10, some Queen 10, and then obviously like King 10, Ace 10. So I just think in general this card is not going to be very good for us. The majority of our betting range on the flop here is going to be like some strong Ace X and straights, and then on the turn like Ace X is obviously losing to trip 10s. Straights can potentially be losing to King 10, Ace 10 now. So I think just in general, we should probably be doing a lot of checking on this card, both with our strong hands and our weak hands. Because if he has a 10, he's going to bet those hands anyway, so we're not losing value when we have like aces and kings and Ace 10 and King 10 and straights. So I don't think we lose value if we check some of our stronger hands because he's going to bet with a 10 anyway. And then he's probably still like... So yeah, I think just in general, I'm going to be doing a lot of checking on this card. Like I said, for me, my brain just is kind of spinning a bit because I don't show up here with Ace 10 or with 10x very much, and I know Joe is if he's betting his entire range here. So yeah, I just think overall that this card is not great for us. The bet on the flop was already pretty thin, so once we decide to double barrel here on the turn, it's just kind of hard for us to get called by worse. And when we use this size specifically, I think he's allowed to fold hands like 7-6 of diamonds here. Maybe the only flush draws he gets to continue with are essentially like Jack 9 and Queen 9, basically flush draws that have a gut shot straight to go with them. And then of course like, you know, King X of hearts, and then Ace X of diamonds. So it's really hard for us to get called by worse when we double barrel here. So I think just in general, I would be checking quite a bit in this spot. And I also think like block betting is not a bad spot to, or bad size to be using here either. Because if we just bet huge, and let's say we have a hand like pocket 10s or King 10, not only are we blocking a lot of value, but we block like a lot of hands that he's going to continue with on the turn. So I think betting small keeps like his weaker range in. And not only does it keep like his weaker value ranges in, but if we like block here on the turn, he's probably still going to have to continue with a hand like 7-6 suited. Where if we just bet big, he probably gets to fold those. And like, yeah, it sucks that the diamond gets in, but whatever. If it gets in, we check, he bets, and we fold. That's just how it is. But when we do bet smaller here, I think there's more of a chance that he continues with some weaker hands. And when we bet big, we're essentially never getting called by anything better here. And that we're just getting like hands that are behind here anyway to fold. So I don't know if this particular size accomplishes a whole lot with our holdings here. And also, I think I would more often than not just be checking a whole lot on this turn card. So, yeah, I guess that's where my head's going to at the moment. This whole hand has been a head scratcher in general, and not just because of the way that Joe played it, but because there's just so much going on this board, and clearly, like, we're all playing a different strategy on this board texture. So not only am I trying to give you guys my thoughts, but I'm also trying to put myself into the mind of somebody who is betting range, and then obviously like you're in a far different spot than I would be if you're betting your range on this board. So yeah, we can definitely look into this spot a little bit deeper here in the future, but a lot of interesting stuff going on in this hand here. So we'll see what ends up happening. Like if he calls, like we're in a pretty gross spot. I mean, I was gonna say even on like the deuce of clubs, it'd be pretty interesting. So wow, so I guess he's just...
Now it's like one hand we beat. It's like king, queen, like that's it. That's the only problem with double barreling is it's tough to get a decent run out in this board.
Mm-hmm.
We could check shove. What do you show down?
That's the, like, only hand that he's like snap checking back like that, I think. Ace check. Am I alone in thinking that? Like, that's kind of lucky that he has that exact combo. I mean, there's full houses. Like, there's all kinds of crazy stuff here in this hand. This hand is absurd.
Yeah.
And
it's a crazy hand.
Does this
imagine he just has like queen 10 here or something? Like, even if we have ace king and it comes to run out, we're so mad, you know.
We'll never bluff shove this river. Like, I mean, it's like super dangerous. But he probably folds ace jack.
This is a crazy one, man. I don't know. Like I said,
I don't even know that he folds
that out. I don't know if I necessarily would do it.
It's hard to picture. Like you said, there's very little hands on the river that I feel like aren't like super strong at this point. Like king queen, maybe like ace jack. Like he's gonna have queen jack, I guess, occasionally. Like there's only a few hands I feel like on this river that aren't boats that he's gonna call that big turn bet with.
Like once we get called on the turn, my instinct's telling me we're behind, frankly, or chopping. You know?
Yeah, I mean makes a lot of sense. I'm in the same kind of boat.
So I mean that should just tell you guys like how strong ranges are here when he just checks back on the river. And for what it's worth, I think his check back is good because when he bets here on the river, what hands that are worse than ace jack are calling versus a bet here on the river?
Absolutely nothing.
Right. So essentially, like I don't know if maybe some people are betting here because they have a straight, but I mean the very first thing you have to ask yourself is what worse hands are calling if I jam here? So, and I would say absolutely nothing. Like ace jack is like essentially a bluff catcher if Joe ends up triple barreling here. And like maybe he ends up getting a hand like that to fold, but the fact that he has a straight and he also blocks hands like pocket aces and ace 10, like he probably has to call down, but it's such a gross spot. And like we're also trying to make a hand like, you know, like a hand like ace 9 fold, but we also block that type of range as well. So it's less likely that he has the exact type of hand that we're trying to make fold here. So yeah, this hand's just crazy. It's starting to hurt my head a little bit, honestly.
I mean, I just think it's interesting if we shove river. Like, we have more aces, kings, queens than him. Like, obviously, we could. I mean, queens is rare, but like we could have been double barrel bluffing with queens because we blocked queen jack. So like, it puts him in like a gross spot where like the only problem is that he has a lot of queen 10, king 10, ace 10 in his range that he's just caught. You know, like he's just trapping us essentially on the turn.
Mm-hmm. But like I'm asking myself in that spot if I'm deciding if I want to shove or not. Like, what can he call confidently with on the turn there? And is that going to have enough showdown value to call my river jam? You know,
I can think of like a decent bit of hands that have to fold there from him. You know.
Yeah, and also it's a pretty strong line considering we bet all three streets under the gun and the runouts ace, king, queen, 10, 10. Like, at worst, we have a good one pair here in our range. Like, there's a lot of, like, three pair, quote-unquote, three pair scenarios we can have here as well. I don't know. It's such a weird spot.
Yeah.
I'm probably not finding it.
When you shove river and just get like snapped off by queen 10, ace 10, king 10, like you're just like, oh, that was dumb.
Like, and it's clearly in his button calling range to have all of those combos here. You know,
yeah, that's the problem.
Yeah, and the other thing
I would love to sit here and say like I'm the super crusher that would find a shove here, but I just don't think that I am in real time, frankly.
Yeah, so I think the other point is that I think in theory there's probably some Jack X that needs to be folding in the button shoes. But the other thing you have to ask yourself is, do you guys ever expect your opponents to fold a straight here? Even if they should be?
Like, yeah, that's the other question is like people don't necessarily make the folds that they should be making.
Right.
You know, that's another problem. Like
I'm probably not
theory, it's a good idea, and probably any of us would lean fold, but not necessarily any recreational player. They might just be like, oh, I have a straight and none of the flushes came in, so.
Frankly, with ace jack, I'm praying that he shoves because I'm never getting value from a call. The only way I'm getting value is if someone decides to bluff this river. Like, I'm probably never folding I'm probably folding against players that have lower numbers, especially river numbers, like if I have a sample on them. But I mean, I definitely think there's people out there that would bluff this river, not realizing that it's actually an amazing river spot, just defaulting that once they bluff turn, they're also going to bluff river, you know?
Yeah, I just wanted to throw that out there as a idea. Just, you know, it's a little out of the box.
I think it's
It is relevant.
sharp, but I don't know that I can find that in real time.
Yeah, especially considering this would be a higher buy-in tournament. Like maybe if this wasn't, well, maybe because it is a higher buy-in tournament, you'd be more likely to try it. I don't know.
You might get more folds, but I don't know enough. I would have to know quite a bit about a specific opponent to make a judgment like that, right?
Yeah, for sure.
Like if I don't know enough, I'm probably just checking. But great hand to review, man. That was insane.
Yeah, that was a lot of fun.
Yeah, I think the biggest thing we can take from here is that it takes a real special type of opponent to be able to find the bluff in our shoes from under the gun and when we're barreling into multiple opponents and we get this run out. I'd say there are very few people who are going to be finding bluffs in this spot. And I think that's why, like, Ace-Jack is not, like, maybe to some of you, as easy of a call as it should be. Because, yeah, you have a straight. But think, like, what are your opponent's bluffs? And, like, is your opponent capable of bluffing here? So, if I'm in the Ace-Jack shoes, I'm throwing up. Like, I know in theory our hand probably has to be a call, specifically because it's blocking some full houses here. But I'm also, like, pretty sure that most people are not going to show up with, like, the 6-5 of diamonds or the Queen 9 of diamonds here and find the bluff on the river. I just don't see very many people doing that. In general, like, our opponents are under bluffing and they're over calling. So that's why I would never, like, in the Ace-Jack shoes, I would never expect the under the gun player to ever find a bluff here where I'm, like, fist pump calling with Ace-Jack. And then on the flip side, if I'm the Ace-5 suited from under the gun, I'm not ever thinking, like, maybe even if they should be folding some Jack-X here, that we're ever going to have opponents capable of folding straights here. And I'm pretty sure, like, they should at least be folding, you know, some semblance of straights versus a triple barrel on this specific board. Again, I can't say that with full confidence because, like, I haven't studied these solvers that much. I've just seen a few sims, and that's really only for flop stuff. But the bottom line is that ranges are just so tight in this spot that it's really going to take a special kind of opponent to triple off here with any kind of bluff. And I mean, what are our bluffs here, basically? that aren't specifically like flush draws and like maybe some Queen 9 of diamonds here that block some full houses and you know can get obviously potential better hands to fold here. So this one's a head scratcher.
Joe said something in text chat earlier that made a lot of sense. Like, I think the most likely flush draws they can have here are like may also have us beat, like ace high diamonds, stuff of that nature is probably like there's not too many combinations that show up on the turn that also have a flush draw. I don't know if I misinterpreted your thoughts there, Joe. Feel free to correct me.
No, I agree with that. I think that, like, because of the way the suits are on the board and everything, like, all the diamond flush draws are either, I mean, considering the fact that he flatted the under the gun open from the button in the first place, so, like, Queen 8 suited is very unlikely, if not there at all. You know, Jack 8 suited probably, maybe there, probably. So, like, all of his diamond flush draws are either Ace X of diamonds or, like, Queen Jack, you know, which already has us beat. And then the heart flush draws on the turn, again, it's hard for me to see what he flatted on pre-flop with and then called the flop bet with. Like, Jack 9 of hearts is ambitious, you know, so it's like maybe King Queen of hearts or King Jack of hearts, but there just aren't very many combos of flush draws at all that I think we're getting ahead of. So it's like, even if he does have a flush draw, we're still.
Yeah, plus especially when you bet so big on the turn, you're narrowing down his range even more because he has to have such a stronger hand to call versus a 2/3 bet size as opposed to like a block bet size. So I feel a lot more confident that we could, like, if we block turn, that he's going to have a weaker range going to the river. So I feel a little bit more confident bluffing into that kind of range as opposed to betting bigger on the turn, that's going to narrow down his range even more than it was on the flop. So I would just know if I'm bluffing in this spot, this guy's range is going to be so tight. Like, what do I even want to bluff? Like, getting to the river like this, because he's just going to have so many good hands that I just don't think my bluff would be getting through very often. So, oh my God, this fucking hand. I'd really love to run this in the solver. I don't know if I'll ever be able to get my hands on something like that, but this is one of the trickier hands I've seen for quite a while.
Come on, man, you got to get us those black market solvers.
Yeah, well, there is a multi-way solver out there, but Pete informed me that Odin's coming out with their own version of it, so I've kind of been holding out to see when they release that. I've seen that in their
Discord as well, some talk of that, but I don't know how quickly that's going to happen. Right. By the way they're talking about it, but I feel like that's the kind of Odin's definitely making some improvements, and I think they added a stack size recently.
Mm-hmm.
I think they added either 100 or like they added a big blind range. So they're definitely adding more data to the pipeline as well, which is great.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's good to hear too. So yeah, I think even heads up, this hand's going to play pretty tight. And I even think if you're heads up and you're the out of position player, you're going to see that it doesn't bet range in this situation. Like, it's very rare that you're the out of position player, even if you're the pre-flop raiser, that you're going to have range C bets in these spots, just because when you're out of position, you're less incentivized to be putting in money because you don't have. It's kind of hard to just triple off all the time. I think from out of position, like you don't have that information on your opponent because your opponent has yet to act. So in general, you just have more checking as the out of position player. And again, these are spots I've been working on a little bit more. I haven't studied so much from the pre-flop ranger's shoes as the out of position player, as opposed to like being the pre-flop raiser and you're going up against the small blind and the big blind. And there's like a lot of random stuff going on in these positions too. So I think even in a heads up pot, this would be interesting to take a look at. So, but yeah, maybe we can check
imagine Battle with Odin if we could just randomly have out of way 3-way pots, like all this random shit.
Mm-hmm.
It's gonna get kind of intense what people are solved at. I kind of like the fact that there's just areas in poker that's a lot harder to solve for or study for than others. And you can definitely observe that in the way people play certain spots.
Yeah, for sure.
My last question, how different do you think this spot plays in the Venom versus like a regular $200 buy-in? You think this plays the same?
As which player, or
like, do you think we need to make any adjustments here? Like, I guess my observation here is I see this a lot in high buy-in tournaments, like not a hesitancy to 3-bet ace jack versus under the gun, where I think in 215s you see a lot more 3-bets there. But like, I saw this a ton in the Venom, where people are just flatting there in position.
I mean, it's always going to be hard to kind of pinpoint what other people are doing with their ranges. That's why things, I think, get a little bit complicated if that's the route that you want to go down, because there's going to be people who don't even know what their own ranges are. So for us to try to be able to pinpoint what they're doing is going to make things more difficult. So I think it's really just going to be easier for us to at least figure out what we're going to be doing and then kind of go from there. You know what I mean? So yeah, things just get like really complicated when you try to figure out what your opponent's doing with their range. So you can at least know what you would be doing from your opponent's shoes and go from there, I guess. But to try to exactly pinpoint,
that's pretty much what I was trying to do. I was trying to figure out, like, what do I do with ace jack there in the Venom?
Kenny, I would say that like just based on like a few of the players I talked to, like a guy like Ryan Reese, I bet he's 3-betting ace jack offsuit. Was this ace jack suited? I guess that's a mixed one, but ace jack offsuit, I bet he's 3-betting it like every time in that spot. But I bet if you're playing some guy who's like a weaker player, he's probably gonna be flatting it a little bit more often. So like, you don't want to make too many assumptions like that, but like, there could be like something you could think of that nature where like weaker players probably will flat like those close spots a little bit more often, maybe than taking that close 3-bet spot. But you don't want to like.
I guess what I'm trying to get
assumptions,
Yeah, and I guess there's minus EV assumptions. Like, I guess what I'm trying to say is, people are people playing more Trappy in the Venom because they're deeper with a better structure, or are people playing more Trappy in the Venom because it's a higher buy-in? Like, I don't have enough experience in $2,500 buy-in online tournaments to really know where these factors are coming from. Yeah, but yeah, it's hard to be a psychologist on the table online tournament here. You know, I'm just thinking out loud.
There was this one hand I saw that Ryan Reese posted in the NFT chat a minute with him, where he was like, I think he 3-bet the button with ace jack off against like the hijack, and then the guy calls, flop was like queen 9-9 rainbow, and he ended up just 3-barrel shoving. You know, and I'm not saying you're doing that all the time, but that's like when you're playing like the really tricky players, they take it to other levels. But I would just kind of, you know, like Kurt's saying, play your stuff, don't worry as much about the assumptions of the other players, and you can make little assumptions here and there for sure. Like I think like that spot that I just said, a lot of players who aren't super elite guys are probably just flatting that. Like ace jack off, hijack opens, you're on the button, they're probably flatting that spot a lot more. But a guy like him, when you're like 45, 50 bigs deep, and he understands maybe that opponent's not 4-betting enough, or that opponent's just been very flatty or opening too much, or whatever it is, so he's taking advantage of that by 3-betting that spot. Well, I think that in like that kind of moment, I would. This is just an assumption. Like I said, it's a little dangerous to make too many of these. Like I think most opponents are going to be flatting that spot with ace jack offsuit. You know, so there's like little things like that when you play guys who are like at that level. Just know that they're very unpredictable. They're a lot harder to predict their hand ranges when you're playing guys like me and Kurt always talk about. The lower levels, they play face up, a little more face up with their hands. So an ace jack offsuit in that spot, hijack to button, will be like an easy flat, while like a good player might think of all the reasons why it might be better to 3-bet that spot. I don't even say I'm 3-betting that spot all the time. I don't think I even am, but it's just something to think about. Like, you know, like a lot of the lower stakes players playing a little more face up, and you know, I don't know, it's just important to make these adjustments and take notes. I think like that one hand when JoeBeagles instantly took, maybe you weren't even here for that, instantly took a note of a guy like snap 4-bet shoving aces on him. You know, like if you see a guy playing like super hyper aggressive and over and over and over, you know, it's good to note that, because then your assumptions are going to change immensely on that guy, and you can make a lot more assumptions if you have good notes. So I think like part of it is just taking that, just playing your normal strategy, and then once you do get those notes or know something, maybe you know this guy's an elite player, or you know this guy's super aggressive, or you know this guy's super passive, and then make those little exploitative adjustments kind of going off that. You know what I mean? That made sense.
Yeah, that's definitely my approach as well. I'm just trying to absorb as much information from these scenarios as I can. I appreciate you guys letting me think out loud and muse a bit.
For sure. Venom, I mean, definitely. Venom's an interesting mix of players. So I think some people go really hard in the Venom, and then some people also play extremely tight in the Venom. So it is just a very interesting blend of players. Like I've seen guys 3-barrel bluffing just with absolute shit in the weirdest spots, but I've also seen guys playing way too tight at certain tables in the Venom. So it's like, it's kind of all over the place. I mean, you know how ACR is. There's just...
Well, the structure was specifically designed to be exploitative, that the people with bankrolls could try to run up a day one stack. Like, there was certain people that had 10, 15 bullets over across the three, what was it, 3 flights?
Damn. Yeah.
And they were just, I mean, respect, you know, if you got it like that, do it, you know. That's like the old 10K rebuy in the World Series when Negreanu was in for like 500K or something like that, you know. Like there's a certain edge to that, especially like Max did this comment earlier. You know, I tell that story about Negreanu, but he probably had multi-million-dollar bracelet bets as a factor as well, you know, if I had to guess.
Yeah.
But yeah, we can move on.
Makes sense. And probably a lot of those people you see in the Venom firing 10 to 15 bullets are backed, you know? They just don't, their backer doesn't give a fuck. Right? They're back. Some multi-millionaires. They're probably not on their own, a lot of those guys. Well, maybe they are. I'm not saying all of them, but, you know, a lot of these guys who are playing, I won't go too much on a tangent, but those guys you see playing like 100Ks, 250Ks, they usually have like 10% of their action.
Yep. And it's usually free-rolled by markup.
Yeah. So it's like, you know, it's like you see those guys playing, they're like, wow, they're putting up 250K, 100K, and like, unless you're D. Peters, because he's fucking like firing, I feel like at least he used to be firing almost all his own action in those tournaments. But
I'll give you an actual example. the 1 mil for one drop that Espondiari won, he had 15% of himself.
Wow.
All marked up.
Yeah, there you go. There you go.
He had 15% of himself? Wow.
Well, he was in an email that was circulating to people I knew. It said he was selling up to 85%. So I assume they sold it all.
$1 million buy-in, right? I mean, shit.
That's still 150K. He's free rolling 150K. It's like, cool, you know?
Yeah,
for sure.
Yeah. Anyway, Kurt, do you want to, we'll wrap this up here. Do you have anything else to say? Anyone else have any questions, any comments they wanted to add in?
That's pretty much it for me, I'd say. We're at the 2-hour mark, so yeah, I guess we'll wrap it up, see if anybody has any other questions, and obviously I think we'll just finish this series on Thursday.
Yeah, perfect.
Thank you.
Oh, you're welcome, Slammer, you're welcome. Yeah, D. Peters is the best on the dance floor too, guys, that's true. You wouldn't expect it. He's like the shyest person ever, man, but get that guy out for a night and it's gonna be a good time.
Like I was out with him a couple nights in Costa Rica. I don't remember many dance moves, but maybe he's gotten better over time.
Alcohol.
Dude, I went to a warehouse party in 2000. I was in Prague, 2012 or 2013. I'm there with I met Shannon Shore there, and he's like, "Oh, you want to come out tonight? We're going to this warehouse party with D. Peters." I'm like, "Fuck yeah!" And it was D. Peters. It was C-Sim Sucks. I don't know if you guys remember that name. I think Ryan something. I might be off on his name. It was me, Shannon Shore, D. Peters, and C-Sim Sucks, and it was just that was the first night I ever saw D. Peters just let loose. And I was like, "Wow, this guy gets down," it's kind of hilarious. He was the shyest guy ever. He literally said 2 words to me at the table, "Hey," that's it. And when we went out, it was just a different story. So just had to throw that out there. All right, guys.
All right. Yeah. Yeah. Thanks, guys. This was a lot of fun. Thanks again to Joe for sending us in this footage. Obviously, we had some pretty cool spots here to look at, and looking forward to wrapping it up here on Thursday. So yeah, thanks again to everybody who showed up. Thank you, Max and Steve and Kenny and everybody else who's in here. And again, we'll be wrapping this up on Thursday, more than likely. And if there's any hands that you guys want us to go over a little bit more in depth, if you want to run them through Odin, just let us know in the hand discussion thread, and we can take a look at them through there. But for now, we'll wrap it up. And thanks again, Joe, and good luck to everybody on the tables. Thanks, guys.
Yeah. See y'all.